Alright, so I did figure out what that hidden code was. I actually missed a word, that's why it wasn't sounding right. Either that or they goofed. But there's literally nothing new. Really. But that hidden message after you typed all those codes spells take the beaches and trees now. I don't know what that means per se, but it does sound pretty interesting, and I do like the fact that they still do this sort of thing. So now I guess would be an appropriate time to basically relay my thoughts. So basically, and I'm actually gonna probably just stay off screen or something. I personally don't like the fact that in the trailer we saw that the women characters were still in fact a thing. Now, it's not that I'm against having female characters as like a playable multiplayer model, but it has, they're going to do it, especially in a World War II setting, it has to be with a faction that it makes the most sense to be a part of. However, in their defense, it looks to me like, based off of the division, like the different divisions trailer or whatever, you're not fighting as one main force. Like, you know, you're not just the U.S. Army. You have, like, for one, armored division apparently is portrayed by a British officer. The mountain men are portrayed by the Canadians, whatever that is. And paratrooper, I think also by Canadian or British. It's not quite. No, it's American. That's what it is. What am I, stupid? Infantry is also American, and apparently the expeditionary class is run by a French guy. I don't know what their ranks are, because some of them mentioned their ranks and some didn't, so it's really hard to tell. But from the look of things, it's what it looks like. But then the question still remains, is like, because apparently someone managed to find out, I don't know if this is true, but one of the weapons that they said was in the game was an SVT-40. And to my knowledge, that weapon is a Russian-made weapon. But I don't see it being used by anyone there, unless you count Germany, but they stole a couple so they could make their G30 or G43 weapon. But I'm looking at the list, and none of the Western European countries used it. So, aside from like Nazi Germany when they captured some, but you know, I don't really see them mentioned here. So I wonder if that was a mistake, if they just put it in there for the classic stuff, or you're actually going to fight. Well, actually, no. You'd still fight in Crimea, because I forgot about that trailer. Earlier in the trailer, it says areas that you'd be fighting in. One of them was Crimea, like the Crimean Peninsula. But I still don't see what a Russian unit soldier would look like in the game. But, yeah, then I would have no problem with that being there, because, as it turns out, and I did some research on this too, if you've ever heard of Sevastopol, which is in the Crimean Peninsula, I don't know if it's actually part of Crimea. In fact, let me look. Sevastopol. Because I know there was a battle there during World War II. Yeah, it's located in the Crimean Peninsula. There was a battle there. If I can just find where it was. The Battle of Sevastopol. This was a well-known battle. It lasted from 41 to 42 against Germany, Nazi Germany, Romanians, and the Italian army. One reason why this is so well known is because of the fact that there was a female soldier. I forget her name, but she was a Russian sniper. I'm actually going to look up her name now. Famous... I don't know her name by heart, so I have to look up famous female snipers, because this is my best way of actually finding that. I believe this is her name. Lyudmila, and I'm sorry if I pronounce this incorrectly, people. I'm not really... my Russian's really bad. Mikhailevna Pavlichenko. Pretty sure I pronounced that wrong. She was a Ukrainian citizen. She was a major in the Red Army at part of the 25th Rifle Division. The reason she was so well known was because of the fact that, you know, she was in fact a sniper. They didn't, like, actually want women in the military for a while, but she was among the first round of volunteers at the Odessa recruiting office, where she requested to join the infantry, and subsequently she was assigned to the Red Army's 25th Rifle Division. She had the option of becoming a nurse, but refused. I joined the army when women were not yet accepted. There she became one of the 2,000 female snipers in the Red Army, of whom about 500 survived the war. Wow, that's a really small few out of that 2,000. In early August of 41, she made her first 2 kills as a sniper near Belyevka, using an SVT-40 semi-automatic rifle with 3.5x telescopic sight. She fought about 2.5 months near Odessa, where she recorded 187 kills. She was promoted to senior sergeant in August of 41 when she reached 100 confirmed kills. When the Romanians gained control of Odessa on the 15th of October in 1941, her unit was withdrawn by sea to Sevastopol on the Crimean Peninsula, where she fought more than 8 months. In May of 42, newly promoted lieutenant, she was cited by the Southern Army Council for killing 257 German soldiers. Her total of confirmed kills during the Second World War was 309, including 36 enemy snipers. She was wounded by mortar fire in June of 42. Because of her growing status, she was withdrawn from combat less than a month after recovering from her wound. So, because she was a renowned war hero, the Russians didn't want to lose that, so they said, you know what, we're going to take you off the front for a bit. So she went and actually visited the United States when she was she was still active service. However, she was no longer on the front lines because, you know, she was a well-renowned war hero in the Soviet Union, so they didn't want to lose that, just like, you know, what happened earlier in World War I when the Red Baron became such an infamous pilot that they actually wanted to keep him grounded so that way he wouldn't actually die. Didn't stop them. But she went to D.C. and later attended meetings of the Congress Industrial Organizations and made appearances and speeches in New York City, Chicago. In Chicago, she stood before large crowds, chiding the men to support the Second Front. Gentlemen, she said, I am 25 years old and I have killed 309 fascist invaders by now. Don't you think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long? Her words settled on the crowd. Then caused a surging roar of support. The United States gave her a Colt semi-automatic pistol, which I can only assume is the Colt 45 that they're referring to. In Canada, she was presented with a sighted Winchester rifle, now on display at the Central Armed Forces Museum in Moscow. While visiting in Canada, along with fellow sniper Vladimir Pushilyatev, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce Russian words, and Moscow Fuel Commissioner Nikolai Krasavchenko, they were greeted by thousands of people at Toronto's Union Station. On Friday, November 21st, 1942, She visited Coventry, United Kingdom, and accepted donations of £4,516 from Coventry workers to pay for 3 X-ray units for the Red Army. She also received Coventry Cathedral ruins, then the Alfred Herbert Works and Stanford Car Factory, from where most funds have been raised. She had earlier in the day inspected a Birmingham factory. Having attained the rank of major, she returned to combat but became an instructor and trained Soviet snipers until the war's end. In 1943, she was awarded the Gold Star and the Hero of the Soviet Union, which is the Soviet Union equivalent to the U.S. Congressional Medal of Honor, and was commemorated on a Soviet postage stamp, which you see there. Later years in death, after the war, she finished her education at Kiev University and began a career as a historian. Nice job. From 45 to 53, she was a research assistant of the chief HQ of the Soviet Navy. She was later active in the Soviet Committee of the Veterans of War. She died on October 10th, 1974 at age 58 and was buried in Novodevichy Cemetery in Moscow. A second Soviet commemorative stamp featuring her portrait was issued back in 1976. Now, there was a movie about her story, and it was released back in 2015. I believe it was a Ukrainian film, but it's called the Battle for Sevastopol, but its Ukrainian title is that. And I'm sorry, I don't speak Cyrillic. I don't know how to write Cyrillic, so I don't know how they can actually do that. But yeah, basically she was the female equivalent to the real-life sniper who had a movie done about him called Enemy at the Gates. Both of which are still well-known snipers, and both their weapons are still actually kept, from what I heard. I at least know that his Mosin Nagant rifle, if I'm pronouncing it right, was actually kept and is in the museum in present-day Volgograd, which used to be formerly known as Stalingrad. So that's interesting. But the other thing I want to mention about the game, from what I saw, and I'm hoping this is just because it's international, like, since this is a world trailer and it's being released to everyone, they can't show this sort of thing. There were no swastikas in the maps that had German flags draped across it. Like, you had the one German flag that looks like the Kriegsmarine flag, which I actually kind of drew because when I'm bored, I like to draw some of this stuff. Now, it doesn't have what I wrote on it, so it basically looked like this without these markings and this word on it. It was just like this. So this is a Kriegsmarine flag, but it was also used outside of the Kriegsmarine, so I don't know why they did both. And then, of course, you had something kind of like this flag, only instead of this symbol and everything else around it, it was still the Iron Cross in the middle, but it looked more like this one in the middle. So yeah, it kind of sucks, but I think if they're just going to do that for the international trailer, then that would make sense. But if they start doing it in all the versions again, I may not be quite as happy in the game as I was the previous titles, because when Call of Duty 3 came out, I'm using this as an example, when the trailer for it came out, and that trailer eventually became part of the loading screen as well for, you know, Call of Duty 3, when you load it up on your PS3, which I have right there, you would see a scene where a guy was throwing his grenade in slow motion, and then it zoomed out to the building he was throwing it at, blowing up, and there was that flag. In the gameplay, or of the US version at least, that's a swastika. But in that loading part, it's the Iron Cross, which would make sense, because it was released internationally, and they do sell these games in Germany, but Germany makes it illegal for you to actually depict the swastika, which It's a bit problematic, but, you know, what are you going to do? I hope that means that they're not actually going to do that in the US version, because that really seems like a bit of a kick in the teeth, if you ask me, especially for historians such as myself. I love history. I'm not really a historian. I'm an amateur historian. I like history, but I'm not a historian per se. But one of the things that also kind of concerns me is that they're censoring Nazi symbolism and fascism, but they have a mode in the game that they didn't officially call it this, but they did actually call it that in the World live stream event. They said a Nazi zombies mode. Well, in order for it to actually be a Nazi zombies mode, don't you have to have some form of Nazi symbolism? Even if it's not the swastika, you're not going to use the SS markings like the well-known Blitzkrieg bolts, or anything like the Totenstrahl or the Toten head badge or whatever it was called. I forgot what the word was. I know it was Toten something because it was dead something. But yeah, I don't think it's gonna work. I hope though, because rumor has it somebody said that and I can't really verify their source, and I don't want to say that this is true, but one person said that they said, oh, that symbolism was going to be featured in the campaign. It's not going to be featured in the multiplayer. And I'm assuming he meant by US versions, because if they basically put that in a German game as well, Germany would have a fit, because of course they made it illegal. Yeah. Am I still going to buy this game? Probably. Now, as for the stuff, I'm not going to play the trailers because, you know, I don't want to face a copyright strike. But I will show you the Charlie Intel article on the things that I was talking about beforehand. Just scroll down. I need to find it. Yeah, it's right here. So they also mentioned, they briefly showed some of their new maps, which I think is pretty neat. Still sad that you can't actually drive some of their vehicles, kind of is upsetting. So here's the Expeditionary Division, which is run by a French guy, I don't know. Infantry was an American. I have this mute button off or on, so I'm just gonna pause it at the point where they are. So get out of there. I don't need you here. So we have that. So judging by her uniform, plus you can see it on her uniform, it says US, so she's with the US Army. Doesn't say what airborne division. This guy is British. I don't know what his rank was. This one was Canadian. And then, of course, we have all the maps of the areas that we'd be fighting in. So, that's it. I'm Captain Alex Mason, and I'll see you guys in whatever video I do next.